All-Star game?
So as far as how things are going for me, it's been nice to have a few days, almost a full week with no games, a nice
Mhm.
time to kind of reset, recharge a little bit in the middle of the season. I know for managers that are just playing fantasy basketball, it kind of stings having this random week with no games at all to watch.
Yeah.
But for us, it's a nice little work vacation without having quite as many blurbs. Still a couple,
Mhm.
but not nearly as many as normal.
Yeah.
So that's been nice to kind of recharge. But as far as the All-Star game or the whole weekend itself, I think most of my frustrations were with the game, and I don't think we're even going to be able to say anything that hasn't already been said on social media about where the NBA or I guess TNT kind of went wrong with
Mhm.
All-Star game. But a lot of it was the fact that it felt more like a show, a presentation, basically that was focused on everything but the game.
Yeah.
Of course, one of the main things that's been circulating is that I think it was 42 minutes of basketball played and like a 3-hour broadcast for the All-Star game, and like that was kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Obviously, you being a Knicks fan, like Jalen Brunson, I think played like a 12-minute game and that was it. And there's a couple
Mhm.
other players that was their first time in the All-Star game and barely got to play. So that was kind of, I guess, disappointing to see. But I thought the basketball ended up being a little bit more competitive, especially towards the ends of some of these games, which was kind of refreshing to see. So hopefully, heading into next season, there will be a nice combination of the game being more competitive, but also, still able to kind of fix some of the issues from this year.
Yeah, it really felt like the game wasn't the centerpiece, which is kind of silly to me when you hear all this talking about how to improve the game. I mean, I would think you need to do more in terms of making sure that, the fans are engaged, like the people discussing the games are actively engaged and not like actively talking bad about the game and the players while it's going
Yeah.
on. It's like, I don't know. It just felt silly to me. Like the weekend, I guess it was all right. Obviously, I wasn't up there, so I wouldn't know like the firsthand experience. But
Hmm.
I kind of wonder how expensive things were. It felt like the crowd wasn't really like. I think there are a lot of empty seats for the game on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know. I just want them to get back to where the game is like the show of this thing. And I think
Hmm.
if you take that approach, the players may follow in suit in terms of their competitiveness level because there's so much going on surrounding All-Star Weekend that by the time you get to Sunday night, I imagine if their batteries are drained from everything that they're doing. Now, some of it's their own doing. You want to market yourself and all that. There's something that's going to come with it, but I really just want them to get back to where the game is like the showcase of the weekend, and then we can just take a couple days to get ready for the stretch run of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think it feels like they're not far off. Like it was very
Yeah,
different this year than past years in a number of ways, but it's like you can kind of see, take the best aspects of the last however many All-Star games and kind of say, okay, this is what we should do next year in Los Angeles. And I think they can make it good. Like
hmm,
not I don't know. There's always going to be that like nostalgia factor of
yeah,
an All-Star game that people watched when they were kids, where it was like the coolest thing ever. And they're like, frankly, you're not gonna be able to replicate nostalgia for somebody that's a lot older, but hopefully the game itself will just be better. And like you said, back to being the focus.
All right, we've got some questions in the queue. Starting with Brian, thanks for tuning in again. Currently in first place, 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. No bye week for the top two seeds. All right. Is it a good strategy to start stashing 4-game teams for weeks 21 and 2021 and 22?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you can afford the stash because you're in first place, there's no buy. So it's like, I guess you could say that you're trying to get an easier matchup in the playoffs, but I
Mhm.
don't think that that really works out the same way in fantasy basketball as it does in real life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if you're not sacrificing too much, trying to maximize your games played in those weeks is definitely a good strategy. Um, I would just keep in mind when you're doing that. I don't have it pulled up to see who has 4-game weeks those weeks, but there could be teams with like players that are either missing back-to-backs or players that could get injured, or teams that start tanking and some of these injuries end up becoming longer term than we were necessarily expecting them to be. So I guess just keep those things in mind when you're looking at potentially some players to stash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the big thing. It depends on where you are, how far ahead of you of second place in the standings, and what can you afford to give up in terms of, because obviously you're going to have to give up something to get something here when it comes to adding and dropping players. To read off some teams that have 4 games for all 3 of those weeks, we've got the Pacers, the Lakers, the Knicks, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Washington. So I think Washington's probably one team that you can definitely look to pinpoint early. We've had some conversations last week's podcast, and we also got a roundtable article dropping a little later today where we kind of talk about some silly season guys, and I think Washington's going to be maybe not like right at the top of that list, but they'll definitely be one of those teams that you're definitely going to want to have to mine for some value there, and you should be able to find some options there.
Yeah, that's a good point, but also back to the teams that might be tanking. Like, I wouldn't be looking to stash a guy like Malcolm Brogdon or Marcus Smart necessarily.
You want to go young.
Yeah, but there is a lot of options there, like Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George. I'm assuming Alex Sarr's rostered, so is Koulibaly. But there is going to be a number of options there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Looks like Mark Williams is back. Should we wait to drop Diabate? Yes.
So, because the report there was that he's in Charlotte.
Yeah.
But there's no update on whether or not he's going to play.
Yeah.
So, I would definitely not be just dropping Diabate right now, because he could just be there and saying, no, I'm not going to play. He could be there and, hey, his physical just didn't get passed. Maybe he's not healthy enough to play right now, and it was something that Charlotte's doctors missed. And now when it's brought to their attention, they're like, he shouldn't be playing. And then, or it could just be they're not going to be able to make a run at the postseason. So why would they, try and just push him when he has had an extensive injury history this early in his career, or he has been an injury prone player. He could just get hurt again. Like, all of those are very real possibilities. So I don't think you should be looking to drop Diabate right now. I mean, I hope Mark Williams stays healthy, but I wouldn't be dropping Diabate.
Yeah, I'd imagine there's also a mental aspect to consider here too, because he was playing before the trade, and then you go across the country and fail a physical. I'd imagine for him, given his medical history, like, what are these people telling me in terms of my health? So that's something else to consider. I would certainly hold on to Moussa Diabate at this point. Now, even if Mark Williams comes back in the lineup, I don't think we're going to see a situation where he's playing like 33 minutes a game. I just don't know if that's going to happen for a team that's pretty much well out of the mix for a playing spot. So I would certainly hold on to Moussa Diabate here. All right. MTS, thanks for tuning back in. Was offered Khalil Ware and Max Christie for my Tari Eason and Alsar Thompson. 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. He's in 11th, and that back-to-back restriction for Eason's obviously an issue. First place is offering to trade. What are your thoughts?
I think I kind of like. I think I would do that. I like what Max Christie has been doing recently. Where he's still been fine. He hasn't been quite as good as he was when he first kind of moved into the starting lineup, but he's still been solid. I don't hate this trade.
Yeah, you're in 11th. You obviously need to make a move, and availability is going to be critical. Also with Christie, with no Anthony Davis, all the injuries that they have, that makes him even more important, even if he comes off the bench down there in Dallas. So, yeah, I think this is definitely a trade I would consider making. I would strongly consider making, if not just doing it now. Okay. They also picked up Bilal Koulibaly using waiver priority at the start of week 15. And so far, I've not loved the move. Should I hold?
Yeah, I would hold. I mean, we just talked about the Wizards schedule upcoming for the playoffs. Like I know he said he's in 11th right now, assuming it's the same league. If you're able to make it to the playoffs, then you have a lot of games played there. That's nice. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of these Wizards young guys down the stretch, so they'll get a chance to work through any growing pains. But there should be some fun games in there as well.
I wonder if we'll see any of AJ Johnson too. I think he's someone else. Obviously acquired via trade in that Middleton deal, so maybe he gets an opportunity that wasn't present in Milwaukee. So, okay, and follow up to that, when Colin Sexton becomes healthy, who should I drop? Same league. You got Finney Smith, Stephon Castle, Najee Marshall, Keontae George, Tari Eason, or Bilal Coulibaly.
I mean, quick look, I feel like it's probably DFS or Najee Marshall. Let me pull up the recent numbers, but I feel like I'd probably go Dorian Finney-Smith.
Yeah, I think the thing about Finney-Smith, you have to wonder, like, could he see more minutes because of the Lakers center position? You know, Jackson Hayes, I assume he'll be back tomorrow. He got hurt in their loss last Wednesday to the Jazz. Alex Len, they put him out there, and it did not go well. They're probably going to have to go small for extended periods, and I think Finney-Smith is someone who would probably benefit from that approach. So I don't know if I would drop him right away. Boy, this is tough. I assume Tari, because you mentioned him in an earlier question, he's going to be off the board via trade here, so can't drop him. I don't know, maybe Keontae, either Keontae or Najee. That's what I'm thinking. But Keontae, you assume he's going to play good minutes down the stretch, even though Utah's tanking. But I guess Najee, if anything, is who I'd probably consider dropping.
Yeah, I think to me it's Finney-Smith or Najee Marshall. Maybe I guess the fact that both of us are saying Najee means it's him. I think with Finney-Smith, my concern is like, even when he has been in the starting lineup, he just hasn't been great for fantasy. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant there. Like, he definitely could move into the starting lineup or see some time at center.
Yeah.
But like, to me, I don't know if he's still worth rostering.
That's a good point. Okay, Delvec checks in. Stephon Castle or Karis LeVert? Which one is more of a hold going forward in 8-cat?
I don't know. What do you think? You go first on this one.
I love Castle's upside, but I feel like even though his fantasy value hasn't it's probably increased, if anything, with De'Aaron Fox in the fold. I still look at him in that 25 to 28 minutes per game role. I think LeVert may have a higher ceiling in terms of the rest of this season. Think about no Jalen Johnson, no Bogdan Bogdanovic. Obviously, they traded him. So there's room for LeVert to provide value, even if he continues to come off the bench. I think your one concern would be if they hit a massive losing streak and then just decided we're going to play Reece Shea 30-plus minutes per game no matter what. That would be the one concern. But I don't know. I kind of feel like LeVert would be more of a hold, at least for the rest of this season. But moving forward, I think it would be Castle.
Yeah, I mean, assuming this is a redraft question, not a dynasty question, because that would definitely be Castle. LeVert for the rest of this season, I mean, he's played 3 games with the Hawks. First game, he got foul trouble. Next 2 games, it was 32 and 35 minutes. And that last game before the All-Star break, 20, 10, and 7. So, and 3 blocks, which I'm not expecting him to continue to be, a massive shot blocker or anything. But I think DeAndre Hunter had been kind of playing that 30-plus minute per game role off the bench.
Yeah.
And it seems like Karis LeVert's just kind of stepping in and doing that. But there's more opportunity for him. Vit Krejci's hurt now, and you're not DeAndre Hunter has a very specific skill set. LeVert, I think, is a more versatile player and can almost kind of fill the backup point guard minutes when Trae Young's off the floor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the playmaking there. He's just a better fantasy player or more fantasy friendly skill set than DeAndre Hunter had. So I think I actually would go LeVert here over Stephon Castle. I just didn't want to seem like a homer. That's why I let you go first.
Yeah, it's a difficult question.
Yeah.
But Okay, Yosef asked, my playoffs start the following week, March 2nd. What teams and players should I target 12-team 9-cat head-to-head? In terms of teams, Atlanta, they've got 4 games. I don't really like Charlotte's overall value, even though they have 4 games. I think it's pretty much like Diabate or bust in terms of players to target. I think Nick Smith had his moments, and he's definitely going to play a lot, but I don't know if I can talk myself into rostering him right now just because of the up and down nature of his production. Dallas, you got 4 games. Their back-to-back is that Sunday, Monday. So you're talking about like week 18 into week 19. So you may be able to get like a Max Christie or your roster. Look for him. I know we said we dropped Najee Marshall for an earlier question, but this schedule may be one where he's worth a look for the remainder of that week. Man. Philadelphia, another 4-game team for that week. Gershon Yabusele is widely available in a lot of leagues, so he'd be someone to look at. I think Quentin Grimes as well, especially if Maxey and Paul George remain banged up. Then we're looking at a situation where he's going to have to do a bit more. I mean, he scored 30 against the Nets in their last game before the break, so he's certainly capable.
Yeah, I think I was just pulling up on Basketball Monster, like the schedule from, assuming if the playoffs start March 3rd for this league, and then the 3-week playoff, the teams that play 12 games during that stretch, Charlotte, Houston, Miami, Philadelphia, and Utah. And Philly does have 3 back-to-backs in that stretch, so that's at least 3 games without Embiid. So, I mean, I know you said Yabusele. I think that he's a very rosterable player. I mean, I'd even be a streamer at this point because he just should be rostered everywhere. So if he is on your waiver wire, definitely got to look at the Utah guys. I mean, I'm expecting a lot of their starters to just not play a lot, like in the case the last few years. So Miami has a couple guys, but I think their rotation, they're still trying to figure it out. We're still trying to figure it out. It was confusing to try and figure out outside of the top few guys who is going to be playing a ton of minutes in Miami before the trade. So I think we'll probably get a pretty good feel for that over the next few weeks. So
I think Brooklyn's got a 5-game week that second week. So, you get out of that first week, that'll be a team to target for week 2 of your playoffs.
Definitely.
All right. And you also asked, who should I target in a trade for Zion? Man. I don't know if that's the greatest. Yeah, that one's tough because between where the Pelicans are in the standings and his availability, I'm not really sure what you're going to be able to get value-wise for him. Like, you can sell upside, but again, I think the downsides kind of outweigh those. So I'm not sure exactly where you would be aiming here, but you're probably talking like around top 100, if not just outside of that threshold at this point. Because I don't really know if you can shoot for like a top 50 or a top 75 player right now.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, I guess this, like, the case for selling Zion, if you're like trying to talk somebody into making a trade for him, it's, hey, if this guy plays, he's going to be very good. But obviously, it's a pretty big if. I guess I would be looking for somebody that I feel good about playing games, even if I'd be sacrificing per game value. It is kind of a hard thing to say. Somebody that's ranked just inside the top 100 that's been pretty available, Tobias Harris. Like, would you rather have Zion or Tobias Harris?
Tobias isn't like that flashy fancy option,
right,
but I know he's going to be available.
Yeah. So I think that type of player, a couple of players that are ranked right next to Zion are Rui Hachimura, Tumani Kamara, Jose Alvarado, Devin Vassell. I don't know. It's honestly, it may just make more sense just to hang on to Zion and just hope that he does play more games, because it's going to be very hard to convince someone to give you a good player for Zion.
Yeah. Do you think Ben Simmons could be productive as a Clipper? Seems like the small ball center role is his, and 22 to 25 minutes seems possible. Yeah, thought he played reasonably well in his Clippers debut. Let me pull up the stat line again, but 12 points, 7 boards, 6 assists, 3 steals, and a block shot in 27 minutes. I mean, we know he's not going to give you 3-pointers. He's not going to be the most active shooter, but he can give you value in some of those other categories, and gives them another playmaker, even if it's at the small ball center position. So I think he certainly can provide good value as a Clipper.
Yeah, that first game was very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to know that he's not going to, I assume he isn't going to play back-to-backs, but I guess we'll see how the Clippers manage that.
Yeah.
Since I don't think he's been available for a back-to-back with them yet. So I would assume he's out for those, at least one leg. Maybe they alternate with Kawhi to make sure one of them is available. But yeah, I'm a little bit more optimistic about it with him playing on a playoff team as opposed to playing on a tanking team. That maybe this is a good situation for him to actually kind of get back on track. I'm not expecting him to be anywhere near what he was during his prime. But yeah, no, I think it's definitely a good idea to try and roster him at this point.
Yeah, their next back-to-back isn't until week 18 in Yahoo Leagues. You're looking at a Tuesday, Wednesday at Phoenix and then home against Detroit. So that would be March 4th and 5th would be their next back-to-back. So you should be able to get a few games in for the rest of this week. And then next week they play 4 without a back-to-back. So I think Ben Simmons is certainly going to have some good short-term value. As long as there aren't too many back-to-backs the rest of the way, I think he can be a solid option for you in 25 minutes per game off the bench. Hey, Zach, thanks for tuning in. He wants to make trades. 14-team 9-cat. He's punting free throws and possibly threes. LaMelo and Sarr for Derek White, Okongwu and Kuminga. Garland and Vassell for Şengün and Austin Reeves. Or Jalen Williams, Devin Vassell for Desmond Bane and Paolo Banchero, and it's a Giannis-built team.
All right, let's break this down a little bit. The first one, let's see. Okay, so we're still punting free throws, and maybe threes. If you're punting threes, I don't love trading for Derek White, but I don't hate it because obviously he still does some other things.
Yeah.
Do we know when Kuminga is going to be back? I think that's kind of a factor there.
I think it's supposed to be an update pretty soon here, but still no definitive word.
And then Okongwu has been decent as a starter, not like excellent. But I guess getting off of like LaMelo's ankle concerns is not a horrible idea, especially with Charlotte kind of towards the bottom of the East. I don't think I hate that first trade, but I don't think it's like so good that it's a no-brainer for sure.
Yeah, I think getting off of LaMelo would be the positive I can see here, but we don't know exactly when Kuminga is going to be back. And then with Jimmy Butler in the fold, I think his role is going to look different than what it did before that trade. So I'm not too big on that first trade. Now the second one, that one's interesting to me. Garland, as good as he's been, you kind of wonder with Cleveland, are they going to try to taper guys down, especially if they maintain their lead at the top of the East? Vassell hasn't really taken off. Like I think a lot of us thought he potentially could with De'Aaron Fox in the fold. So I think getting Şengün and Austin Reeves, I could be persuaded to do that. But the first one, I'm not too sure about the third one either. Banchero, I don't know, man. He just doesn't seem to have like the most fantasy-friendly game, even if you're punting a couple of these categories here. But
yeah, I was gonna say I'm not a huge fan of that last one. Especially if you're punting threes, then like that's a fairly big part of Desmond Bane's game right there. Yeah. But I get that Banchero probably fits with that punt free throw build, but he's like struggled in other categories as well. So I think you'd be losing out on a lot, especially giving up a guy like Jalen Williams. I think I like that second trade the best. I think I agree with you. Garland's been great. Şengün definitely fits with a punt free throw build, but has also been very good in a bunch of other categories. And Vassell's been kind of iffy. I'm not convinced that he's going to just remain in the starting lineup for the rest of the season. I think it's probably like a 65, 70% chance that he does. But with the way Stephon Castle's playing, it wouldn't be like shocking if they gave the guy they just drafted in the top 5, like moved him into the starting lineup, see if Vassell can be more of a shot creator off the bench. And maybe if that gets him going, if it just benefits the team. So maybe that helps him, but that probably also limits his upside a little bit. So I do think I like that second one the best. I think if I was ranking these trades, it'd be the second one, the first one, and then the third one last. Yeah, I think the first one I'm very, very iffy about. I think there's just a number of factors there as far as players' health. Okongwu has been very hit or miss since moving to the starting lineup. Either has like an insane game or it's like, were you even out there? So it's kind of risky heading into the playoffs if you're giving up a star like LaMelo. But then again, the ankles have just been frustrating again.
All right. Daniel, thanks for tuning in. Did Anthony Davis's arrival in Dallas doom Derek Lively's outlook in dynasty formats?
I don't think so. I think, one, Lively's still incredibly young. So I don't think, maybe it limits him a little bit for the next few years. But, Lively will be hitting his prime when Anthony Davis has either already been traded, signed somewhere else, or he's getting close to retirement. So I'm not too concerned about that long term. I think maybe the next year or two it does a little bit, but Anthony Davis has been very, very vocal about wanting to play power forward. I think Lively would, when everyone's healthy, I think that they would both start. And obviously he'd still be, assuming Gafford's still there, that they're kind of splitting the center minutes. But I think Lively's a good passer for a big. So I think that'll fit well next to Anthony Davis. And if he's the guy that's more down low, so AD can play a little bit more on the perimeter, then the blocks and rebounds are still there. I think it's actually going to be pretty scary for teams playing against Dallas when everyone's healthy.
And plus, next year is a contract year for Gafford. So I think that may also factor into the dynasty value of Lively moving forward. So I don't think it doomed it by any stretch. We still need to see how those guys look together on the floor since Lively's been out. But given his skill set, I think it'll mesh nicely next to Anthony Davis, if they want to go with that 4/5 combination for the future. So I don't think it did at all. I agree with Noah. All right, Matt, thanks for tuning in. Would you drop Ellis, Grimes, Matkovich, or Aaron Gordon to pick up Dante DiVincenzo? 9K head-to-head.
Is DiVincenzo, what's the timeline on him? Let me try and see when he's supposed to be reevaluated. Let's see. It was initially out at least 3 weeks. That was January 24th, so he could be back pretty soon. I haven't seen an update on him recently, but no, I don't hate picking him up. And that's the first step of this. I think the player I'd probably drop here is Keon Ellis. I think he has an incredibly fantasy friendly game, and I wish that the Kings would play him more, but the simple fact is that he's not going to move into the starting lineup over everyone that's in the starting lineup. So it's been the production's been very hit or miss, where he'll, if his shot's falling and they were like, okay, cool, we'll play him a little bit more, then that's more opportunity for him to get steals. But if not, then he's just not out there enough for me to prefer him over the other guys here.
Yeah. Grimes and Matkovich can be kind of rolls of the dice just because we'll see what happens, once guys start to get healthy or what have you. But I think in both cases, they're on teams that are headed in the wrong direction. I think Philadelphia obviously can still make a run in the East because it doesn't really feel like Brooklyn or Chicago wants to be the 10th seed either. So Philly may be able to make a run as long as they don't pull the plug, which probably limit him a little bit. But yeah, I think Ellis is the guy to drop here. I wouldn't do it right away because, like we said, we still don't know exactly when DiVincenzo is going to be back on the floor. But I think when the time comes, it's probably going to be Keon, just because in addition to his minutes, you got Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine. Those guys are all going to be high usage guys, and that doesn't even take into consideration Sabonis. So I feel like his upside is a bit limited, even with the good things that he brings to the table there in Sacramento. All right. Brian chimes in. For my 10-team 9K head-to-head, who is the better stash for silly season? Grimes, Castle, or Bub?
I like Bub. I think that round table you mentioned earlier, I had Bub as my Eastern Conference stash. I think the last 5 games before the All-Star break, he started, and the numbers were great.
Yeah.
I don't see a reason for them to take him out of the starting lineup, but I think we've said that pretty much every time he's moved into the starting lineup this season, and then they tend to do it. But now that it's kind of towards the end, like second half of the season, less than 2 months left, I'd be very surprised if Bub Carrington was moved out of the starting lineup.
So, now starting Marcus Smart.
The Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon backcourt in the starting lineup is going to piss me off.
Yeah, I think that's fair. As much as we like Castle, it feels like he's probably going to be consigned to a 6-man role for the rest of the season, unless something were to change with either Chris Paul or Devin Vassell. But I don't think that's going to happen. So, yeah, I think Bub's going to be the guy that's your best stash of these 3 options. How many rounds of value did Buzelis lose when factoring the dunk contest? Kidding aside, will he beast the rest of the season? I don't know if I'd use the word beast, but I think he can be pretty good as long as they give him those minutes. I know minutes have to be earned, but you also have to let some of these younger guys kind of play through mistakes too. So I think as long as he's getting high 20s, low 30s in terms of minutes, he should be fine in terms of fantasy value. Like I don't know. When I hear the word beast, I kind of feel like top 50, top 75. I don't know if he's going to be that good, but maybe you can get top 100 value for the rest of the season if the minutes are there.
Yeah, I think he's a player that should be rostered. Started the last 4 games before the All-Star break. Last 7 games, he played at least 25 minutes, and the one that he didn't, they lost by 40 to Detroit. So probably didn't earn playing more minutes than that because it didn't go very well. But I think that he's been productive enough to be worth rostering at this point. But I think, like you said, don't know if it's quite top 50. I think top 75 is probably the ceiling for him for the rest of the season.
All right. Can you opine on the rest of the season outlook for Risa Shea and Nick Smith Jr., given the holes in Atlanta and Charlotte, respectively?
I think Risa Shea is going to run into the same issue that he has all season. And that's if his shot isn't necessarily falling or he's not playing incredibly well, he'll continue to start, but he might play 18 minutes. So I'm not super optimistic on that. The Hawks don't have their own first-round pick, so they're not going to pull the plug and tank. They're going to try and win as many games as possible. And so Risa Shea will still have a role, but I don't know if that necessarily means enough of a role for him to be like a 12-team guy. But Nick Smith has been starting. We've talked about LaMelo's ankles a couple times. I hope that LaMelo's healthy the rest of the season, but he's injured the same ankle, I think, a couple times over the past few weeks. And it would be surprising if they didn't kind of manage his ankles over the final 2 months since they're not in the playoff race at all.
Yeah. Feels like Risa Shea's on that Andre Jackson Jr. plan where he starts but only plays like
the number one pick
in terms of
Andre Jackson Jr. plan. That's
not good. But yeah, I think Nick Smith, even though the efficiency can be an issue with the shooting, he's in a position where he's going to get quality minutes moving forward. In terms of value, I'm not really sure how high they'll be able to get in terms of fantasy value, but I think he can definitely be a 12-team guy and maybe like a late round value in 12-teamers for him the rest of the way. I don't really see that for Risa Shea this season. Okay. Is Alsar Thompson's latest run a peak at his ceiling or a fluke?
I think it's a peak at his ceiling. I think Asar is going to be phenomenal. As a fan, like a very fantasy friendly player, it's not quite Amen Thompson, but he's been like Asar's been fantastic, and I don't think that it's just like a random fluke. I think like he is a fantasy stud.
Yeah. Over the last 2 weeks, top 40 if you punt free throw percentage. So yeah, he's been on a roll. I think the tough thing about his ceiling is that he's playing with Cade Cunningham, and I think that may be the difference. Like Fred VanVleet in Houston doesn't have to have the ball in his hands as much, so Amen has a little more room to kind of shine as a playmaker, while Cade's going to have the basketball a lot. So I think that would be the difference. I don't think it's a fluke by any stretch, but I do feel like compared to his twin brother, the ceiling may be a little bit lower based on where they are in terms of the teams that surround them. Kool-Aid Trippin is back. Thanks for tuning in again. Would you drop Jose Alvarado when Dante DiVincenzo comes back, or would you rather keep him?
I think I'd rather hold on to Jose Alvarado. I think it could depend on what categories maybe you need help with. If you need the assists or steals, I'd rather have Alvarado. If you're really desperate for threes, then you could probably go Dante. But I'm not like, is Dante going to start immediately when he gets back? Because I know he was starting before he got hurt, but before that, he was coming off the bench because he was struggling when he started, kind of like when he joined the Timberwolves. But I guess maybe wouldn't be different about that. I think Alvarado's a little bit safer. His role is a little safer with DeJounte Murray out for the season. But I think you could just, the category dependent, or what categories you need help with is definitely a factor.
Yeah, I think I'd keep Alvarado. Who else are they going to play at point guard at this point? Like, they can play CJ McCollum there, but I don't really think they'd want to do that when you're in the situation that they're in. I think he's going to be in for some rest days the rest of the season himself. So I think I would rather hold on to Alvarado in this scenario here. Okay, we got 4 guys to rank for the rest of season values from Nomad T. Nick Smith Jr., Quentin Grimes, Gershon Yabusele, and Carlo Matkovic. I think I'd go Gershon 1.
Yep.
Smith 2. And then Grimes and Matkovic. That's where I kind of stumble here, because I think Grimes is very much dependent on what happens with the mainstays in that roster. You know, if they stay healthy, then he's probably limited there. While Matkovic, I think part of it's like, will the Pelicans commit to playing him and Misi as the 4 and the 5 with Zion at the 3, or do they try to stagger those opportunities a bit? I guess I'll go Matkovic 3 and then Grimes 4, but I don't feel great about that.
Yeah, I think I would same 1 and 2, and then I'd probably flip them. I think just Grimes feels a little safer to me. I think Matkovic can be a very good fantasy player. We've seen a few really good games from him. We've seen some duds from him as well. And I feel like there's almost like a less of a guarantee that he's going to continue to start or continue to play a lot of minutes. So I think the floor is just so much lower for Matkovic that I'll put him last, but could definitely see a scenario where he's a really good player during silly season.
Okay, James asked Jackson Hayes or Kelly Olynyk rest of the season, 14-team, 10 category roto, I guess. There's a 10G.
10G. Well, I'll just say outside of what that could be, if we just go, I don't know. I think I feel a little bit better about Jackson Hayes at this point.
Yeah.
I don't foresee him moving out of the starting lineup. I don't think that they're going to find someone in the buyout market or add Dwight Howard or DeMarcus Cousins or something like that bumps him out of the starting lineup. Yeah. So the opportunity will be there. Whereas we haven't seen Kelly Olynyk play with the Pelicans yet. Mm-hmm. And because they are where they are in the standings, I don't feel great about him playing either a ton of minutes or just like a ton of games.
Yeah.
We were just talking about Mekovic and Yves Missi, and I think that those two are probably going to be prioritized over the final 2 months of the season because their development and helping the Pelicans lose is a good thing. And I'm afraid that Kelly Olynyk might be too impactful towards winning for them to play him a lot. So I don't feel great about him. So I think I'd lean Jackson Hayes.
Yeah. I think the thing about Olynyk, we think back to that run he went on in Houston a few years back, like the last month of the season where just insane fantasy value. I don't think we're going to get that for the reasons, Noah mentioned in terms of the Pelicans rotation. So, yeah, I take Jackson Hayes because I don't think they're going to play like 48 minutes of small ball in LA. Like they won't be able to do that. So, yeah, I think Hayes would be my pick as well. All right, and Daniel chimes in for a few suggestions for that Zion Williamson question from earlier. How about a Christian Brown, Toumani Camara, Max Christie type of player with lesser name value but a safer floor? I know you mentioned Camara earlier, so I think those are good places to look. Brown's been really good in Denver here recently, especially with Westbrook out. I think that would be the one question. But I feel like he's done enough to maintain that place in the starting lineup. Even if he doesn't, he should play good minutes off the bench either way. So, yeah, I think this is kind of what you're looking at, which is amazing given the hype that Zion entered the NBA with. And now we're mentioning him in the same sentence fantasy-wise with Christian Brown, Toumani Camara, and Max Christie. So, yeah.
Yeah, not exactly what, like probably some of the names that we were expecting to be talking about Zion with, but I think this is a great group of players to kind of target. Maybe not these ones specifically, but like these ones specifically along with some others. Just because they are the opposite of what Zion is. Like they are like generally available, have had some really good games. So yeah, I think I like these guys as targets. Maybe you could try and go a tier up, but I'm not sure exactly what kind of names that looks like. Just like see how much you can get off of Zion's name value.
Bigger silly season hero, Isaiah Collier or Jose Alvarado? I like Collier.
Yeah.
And given what he does in the assist category, he can get you some defensive stats too. So, yeah, I would definitely take Collier over Alvarado in this question.
Yep. I think there's not many players that are getting as many assists as Isaiah Collier recently. So,
What do we think about Donovan Clingan's value for the rest of the season and beyond? I can tell you for everyone except for me picked Clingan as their silly season star from the Western Conference.
It's funny.
But yeah, high value rest of the season. I guess I'll let you kind of touch on like the potential fantasy dynasty value for him.
Yeah, I think what we've kind of seen the last two games is a good example of what we could see from him both rest of the season and from a dynasty perspective, like long term. He had 21 points and 7 rebounds in that first game that DeAndre Ayton got hurt. Next game followed it up with 17 points, 20 boards, 3 blocks. I think it's going to be pretty traditional center stats. Think like Walker Kessler, but not necessarily exactly the same. I think he's got more shooting upside, and he is a pretty good passer for a big. So that's even more exciting. I think he'll end up being a little bit more versatile on offense than Walker Kessler has been. So I don't know. Kessler had a lot of hype after his rookie season from a dynasty perspective. And I think if we see Clingan continue to produce the way he has the last couple of games, we'll see some pretty insane hype from him. So I think should be a much must roster player for the rest of this season, especially with Aiden out at least a month. And that wouldn't be surprising if they just sat him out the second, or I guess the final month of the season, because unless they are able to get another winning streak, but I'm not really expecting that to happen. I'm actually working on Dynasty rankings right now, so I think Klingon's going to be pretty interesting to see where he falls in that, because I haven't gotten to him yet. So
yeah. Will Dwight Powell start for Dallas? Is he worth picking up? At first glance, like no, but no Gafford, no Lively. I think no Davis. I mean, unless they want to roll Kyler Kelly out there, he just might start. But I don't know if he's worth picking up. Like, that's where I kind of stop. Yeah, I don't know if I'd pick him. It's almost like a warm body effect. Well, he's available, but I don't know if I'd consider him being worth picking up, especially in standard leagues. Like deep leagues, you may be able to talk me into it, but I don't know if I can go as far as a 12-teamer.
Yeah, I wrote the blurb earlier saying that he has participated in quote unquote full workouts during the All-Star break. So assuming he's back fairly soon, I think in that report it was from Grant Afseth. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I could be wrong. Yes. Apologies. But that he, or like whoever he talked to, said that like I wouldn't have known he was recovering from an injury if like you didn't say anything, because like he looked good. So the fact that they have been using kind of a small ball lineup, like Kyler Kelly's only played like a couple minutes, even though he is the only center option available. So Dwight Powell would be an easy guy to throw back into the starting lineup. Started a lot before they kind of got Gafford and Lively, but he never played like 30 plus minutes often. I could see him playing 20 to 25 minutes. His career averages as a starter is 9.1 points and 5.4 rebounds. I don't think that he is a must roster player. You could take a chance on him in a standard league and maybe in like a slightly like deeper league, like a 16 team league. There's a little bit more appeal there just based off the opportunity. But I don't know. It's hard to say if he's worth the pick up. He's maybe worth taking a chance on in a deeper league. I think that's the best way to put it.
Hey, Boston will rest Derek White a lot down the stretch, right? I don't think that's guaranteed. It's all about the standings. Like obviously they've absolutely drilled the Knicks a few times this year already, but I think the gap is still
it's 2.5.
Still 2 games in the loss column. So
yeah,
I don't know if it's a lock that he's going to rest a lot down the stretch. And plus, you got the Drew Holiday situation too with his injury. So we'll see what happens. I think first and foremost, what happens when Drew Holiday returns? How much can he play, and can he stay healthy? Because if he can, then maybe you're looking at some different rest staggers and whatnot. But I think that's going to be the question to answer in terms of how much Derek White's going to play down the stretch.
Yeah, and I mean the Celtics are 2.5 games ahead of the Knicks. They're 5.5 out of first place in the East. I'm sure they'd love to get home court if they can. So the only situation in which we really see them resting players, I think, is if there's like a 5+ game difference between them and the Cavs and them and the Knicks at the same time, and it's like April, because at that point it's like, okay, they're practically locked into the 2 seed, maybe like late March when it's not officially locked in but basically locked in, where they're like, okay, like we're not moving in standings no matter what happens. We can take a game or 2 and rest some of our guys, especially on a back-to-back, but they're not really in a position where they're running away with the conference like they were last year. So no, I'm not expecting a ton of rest.
I kind of wonder how important home court would be for them. You know, they've already won the title. They rolled through last year. I feel like they're pretty secure in where they are. And then you're looking at what? The first 2 rounds, you have home court and probably have to go to Cleveland. You know, so I don't think they're too concerned with that. But you never know. You know, I think it's the Celtics. I think the key for them is just to be healthy, no matter what the standings say. Oops, wrong one. Okay. Are we panicking on Khalil Ware or keeping the faith? Keep the faith, man.
That's always the answer.
Yeah, that's what I say. He's still starting. You know, the production may be down a little bit, but I think he'll be fine. You know, keep the faith. Don't make any rash decisions in terms of like dropping him or anything like that. So, yeah, keep the faith for sure.
Yeah, I'm not looking to get rid of him by any means. I think the upside's too high. We've seen what he can do. Less than a month ago, he had back-to-back 20-point double-doubles. I think a couple of average games and a couple of below average games just before the All-Star break, which is, if we're really going to try and look at it detailed, like it's his first NBA season. It's his first All-Star break. He's spent 4 months in a row playing at an incredibly high level, a lot longer than he ever did in college. And let's see, I think 6 of their last 7 games are on the road. Like it's these like things that like young players need to adjust to. So I think the All-Star break may be good for him. And we often see rookies play really well or better than they did early in the season over the final 2 months because they're starting to figure things out. So no, I wouldn't be dropping Ware at this point.
Yeah. 38 games played, which is more than he played in any of his college seasons. So, you get the break to recalibrate, rest up a little bit, kind of digest what you've experienced. I think he'll be fine. All right. MTS asking about the same team he had earlier. Anthony Davis on IL. Does he have any trade value? And if so, what type of offer might you make to a manager near the top of the standings? That's tough because we don't know the state of his injury. Like they still haven't decided. I know it was reported that he wasn't going to have to undergo surgery, but I read yesterday that they're probably going to have to do a little bit more looking into this to figure out what the ultimate course of action is going to be. So for that reason, I don't really know if you can say that he has much trade value right now.
Yeah, I would explore the options.
It doesn't hurt to look for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how low I'd go in terms of value. I would immediately reach out to like the top 2 teams in the league and say, hey, do you want to stash AD? I need somebody to help me now to make the playoffs. You're 1 or 2, like you're going to make it. And if you have AD added to your team and he comes back healthy, like you're going to win a championship. I'm looking a few guys kind of around the top 50, maybe a little above the top 50. Tyler Hero, John Collins, Norm Powell, Desmond Bain, Jalen Brunson, Derek White, Zubats. I think it's a clear teardrop there, and maybe even 2 teardrop, but just having someone playing games that is, you're adding a top 50 player for potentially somebody that wouldn't play for you the rest of the season. Like there's a chance and you're able to do something like that. I don't know how much lower I'd go in terms of value, but I think though that range of guys is a pretty good one as far as who I'd be fine trading AD for. And it'll look like a very lopsided trade, but if you're in 11th place and you gotta make a run at this point.
you need people who can actually play basketball at this point. All right, Scoot Henderson for the rest of the season. What are we thinking there?
I'm excited. I think he started to kind of play better over the past month or so. A couple duds in there, got hurt right before the All-Star break after a nice stretch. And I think his progression as a basketball player has like kind of shown up in fantasy, but I think he's just genuinely been better than he was for like the first year and a half of his career. And I think he was a big reason that they win on that, nice winning streak there. So hopefully he's healthy and this ankle injury isn't going to linger on after the All-Star break. So I think he should be a rostered player. I think you drafted him in our silly season draft, if I'm not mistaken. So
no, I took Tumani Kamara. I did draft him. On the pod. I thought you were mentioning the column. I did draft Scoot. So I think he can be a top 100 player for the rest of the season, to be honest with you. That's what he's been over the last month. The turnovers, he's kind of gotten those in check too. So that's been the key for him. So yeah, I definitely like what he's done leading into the All-Star break, and I think he can continue on that path. So yeah. Thomas asks, would you trade Josh Giddey for Paul George? 9 cap.
It's a yucky trade.
Yeah. Like straight basketball, absolutely. I kind of feel like Paul's going to figure something out eventually. He can't be this bad. Like he can't. He just can't.
Saying it for
like,
months.
I know, but eventually he's gonna figure this out. I think I would make that trade. It's a risky trade, but I would make it.
I'm less convinced. I think Giddey was pretty good over the final, I guess, couple weeks before the All-Star break. Has just genuinely been better with the Bulls than he was with the Thunder. But it's like I don't really like want either player that bad.
Yeah.
Just trying to think about like, is Paul George playing as like while playing as bad as he has been? Is that still better than Josh Giddey? Like it might be. Yeah, I think you probably do need to do this. That makes sense. It's a sell high on Giddey, buy low on Paul George. I mean, he should be able to be better than he has been.
The thing is, on Basketball Monster, they've both been 6-round players over the last month. So as much as we've said about Paul, like his floor seems to be like on par with Giddey's ceiling, and that's why I would do it.
Yeah, and he's not going to score 2 points in a game often, right?
I hope not. But,
it can't happen again, man.
Yeah. Does the Dancing Bear boogie better with or without Embiid? Yeah, I guess, yeah. Just because he's going to have more room in the front court to kind of operate, but.
Wait, what?
Yabusele.
Is that his nickname?
Yeah.
That's a.
I prefer Beignet Wallace, but whatever, man.
The Dancing Bear.
Okay. Yeah. I think he plays better when Embiid is out of the lineup. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Do you think Kawhi will start playing back-to-backs in March? I don't know if we can say for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
can't really say for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They might, but his minutes are increasing, which is a great sign. But how far do they want to push him at this point? Because it's like if we can just get him playing 33 minutes per game, rest him back-to-backs, and he's healthy for the playoffs, then they want that was a winning move. Mm-hmm. But if they're like, ooh, let's get him to start playing back-to-backs, and then all of a sudden something else pops up, it's like, dang, what if we wouldn't have done this? We may have had him healthy. I don't see a reason for them to risk it.
I think they'd have to be in a pretty desperate spot in terms of the standings to try to do that. Yeah. And even then, I kind of wonder if there would be pushback on his part to not play back-to-backs for the rest of the season. So, all right. Drop Miles Bridges for Klingon in Dynasty Leagues. Thank you for asking the question, Jordy. I would say I'd try to trade Miles Bridges. Maybe you can get like some future draft capital for him instead of just dropping him outright. That way you free up the roster spot to pick up Klingon. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I agree. If Klingon is on your waiver wire at Dynasty League, I would say definitely just get him on the roster as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. My question here would be how many players are rostered in your Dynasty League? I think generally speaking, you're looking at 250 to 300 players rostered, if not more, depending on your league size. So if you're in a Dynasty League that's rostering like 150 players or something like that, then maybe you need to look at expanding rosters because neither of these players should be on the waiver wire in a redraft or a Dynasty League. So to answer this question, like, yes, I would, but I think that there are a lot better options here, such as like Raph saying, trading Miles Bridges or just arguing with your league mates to get rosters expanded and just adding Donovan Clingan. But that's probably more of an off-season thing. Yeah. I would prioritize getting Clingan on the roster now.
All right. Let's just quick fire through these last couple of questions. Who would you rather have rest of the season, Grimes or Alvarado? Standard league punting field goal percentage.
I think I'd rather have Alvarado. I like he impacts more categories, so I'd rather have that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Drop Mark Williams to keep Day'Ron sharp for the rest of the season, or keep Day'Ron sharp, I would assume. No, yeah, drop Mark to pick up. I don't
know. I'd rather have Mark Williams because I don't think that Sharp has enough upside for me to consider dropping Mark Williams. I think Noah Clowney being out maybe has helped him a little bit recently, but Noah Clowney and Nick Claxton are ahead of him when they're both healthy. So I'd rather have Mark. I'd rather take the chance on Mark Williams.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Until there's a more official report. And then,
yeah. You have any concerns about Devin Vassell for the rest of the season? I think we kind of touched on that earlier. Yeah, it hasn't been great since he added De'Aaron Fox to the fold. So there's certainly some concern. Not enough to drop him in a standard league, in my opinion, but certainly something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, a little bit of concern about the way he's played, but I'm more confident he'll figure that out. The more of the concerning part to me is like, do they just turn to Stephon Castle, who's played really well, and move Vassell to the bench? I think that's where I'm a little bit more worried, but still not overly concerned.
Okay, let's see. I gotta pull up the schedule for this last question. Ernest asked me.
We can plug the silly season draft.
Yeah,
go check out
that episode. Yeah, yes, for sure. Check out last week's episode of the Rotoworld Basketball Show for the silly season draft. 5 rounds between ourselves and Dan Titus, Yahoo Sports. You may be able to find some interesting values there for the rest of the season. So the post All-Star break targets. Yeah, I kind of feel like we said at the start, you're looking more towards teams that are headed towards the draft lottery, if anything. Let's say Charlotte, Utah. I think Utah's got really promising guys in terms of Collier. Even Kyle Filipowski, he played well in their last game before the break. So he's another one to consider. Portland, Clingan, Kamara, Scoot. Those are guys who should be pretty available in a lot of leagues. New Orleans, I was high on Yves Missi earlier this season, but not so much now. So I'm not really sure I would go there. But Washington, if I didn't mention them earlier, that's another team that you're going to kind of want to, dig in the crates for, so to speak. Use a hip hop term. Find some decent values.
Nice. Yeah, I like those.
Yeah. All right. So once again, thank you as always for tuning in. Ask some really good questions. Rotoworld Basketball Show tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern on Twitch with ourselves and Dan Titus, Yahoo Sports. I'm sure we'll figure out some fun things to talk about, fantasy basketball related. And we got actual basketball to watch tomorrow. Hornets Lakers in a makeup game and 9 games on Thursday and Friday. So until then, thank you again and take care.